Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Pierce, and I'm the Director of Programs at the American Nutrition Association, the ANA. The ANA would like to thank Bragg Health Foundation for their support of our 2018 Global Webinar Series. Learn more about their mission to inspire and educate people to adopt a healthy lifestyle through optimal nutrition, exercise, positive attitudes, and spiritual wellness at bragghealth.org. The American Nutrition Association is very pleased to be hosting Finian Makepeace tonight. Finian will explain the impact that soil has on the lives of billions, how the food you eat can heal your body and save the world. Let me take just a moment to tell our audience about the ANA. We are a nonprofit organization which for over 40 years has been on a mission to promote optimal health through nutrition and wellness education. We educate the public and professionals in many ways, including hosting world-class nutrition programs such as this one tonight. We encourage all of you listening this evening to visit our website at theana.org for an abundance of nutrition information, resources, and upcoming webinars. Join the ANA as a member and help us continue to bring these nutrition luminaries to you. The ANA would like to thank Now Foods for providing the technical assistance that allows us to present our webinar series. Find them at nowfoods.com. And now we are honored to introduce Finian Makepeace. Finian is the co-founder of Kiss the Ground, a nonprofit that empowers people to restore soil and help accelerate the adoption of regenerative agriculture. He is a recording artist, activist, and self-taught soil advocate whose passion for changing the world brought him to study political science at UCLA. He strives to make the world a more peaceful and harmonious place for humans and all of nature. Finian loves to make music, build gardens, and bring people together for common causes. His work with Kiss the Ground has grown into a book and upcoming documentary by the same name, co-directed and produced by partner Josh Tickle and Leonardo DiCaprio. Finian will answer a few previously submitted questions at the conclusion of his presentation. So welcome, Finian. A pleasure to have you with us.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here talking with you all. I think what I'm most excited about is organizations like yours' dedication to really getting the public to go beyond our typical normal view of health and nutrition, to start looking more holistically at it and looking at what we can do and the whole systems of everything from our food, how it's produced, to what we're eating and what's inside of that food to really make great strides in human health. I'm really excited about that, and I'm really excited to be presenting to you all what we're really passionate about here at Kiss the Ground and how it relates to human health, but also to planetary health and the bigger picture of our planet being abundant and able to sustain not just humans, but all of life. So my presentation today is going to jump into some kind of big ideas that Kiss the Ground's really excited about promoting. As you're looking at this first slide, we have the words degeneration and sustainability crossed out, and the word regeneration is in big, bold letters. So what we're going to be talking about a lot today is regeneration. And soil, and you'll get further into this with me, but soil is our really practical, universally applicable, common ground issue that really makes regeneration a thing that our future can be all about, whether it's human health, planetary health, and all ecosystem functioning. So I want to tell a little bit of background about Kiss the Ground. Kiss the Ground was founded about 5 years ago off of the premise that myself and the other co-founder, really both being pretty avid environmentalists, were shared a new view. And what we got from this new view, the really big why behind our organization, is we realized that we can do this. And I hope upon hope that everyone listening here can have that same amazing awakening of we can do this that we had, or something like it. Basically, we saw that humanity can live regeneratively and actually reverse climate change, restore water cycles, and rebuild our farmland. These big ideas, this big overarching idea, as someone who considered themselves a science-based thinker and someone who had been educated on pretty much all the environmental things happening with global warming, I felt like I was in the 95th percentile or so of people who understood what was happening on a global level with climate change and all of these things that were happening because of it. And when I learned about this, to me it was such a big moment because it came out of left field and I had never heard about it before. And so I had a moment of recognizing that if I hadn't heard about it, I'm pretty sure a huge percentage of the population hadn't heard about it. So that moment for me, and the same for the other co-founder, was it was just too big. It was just too big of a aha moment to say, well, I'll let someone else talk about that. So we both kind of just said very early on, right in the beginning, was we have to get this idea out. We didn't know we were going to be a nonprofit. We didn't know our name was going to be Kiss the Ground. We didn't know any of this stuff was going to unfold that's happened over the last 4.5, 5 years, but we just knew that we had to do something to get the word out on this. So that was the foundation, and our mission at Kiss the Ground really is to inspire participation in the global movement to restore soil. And that really is the passion behind what we're doing and why we've dedicated much of our time to creating media. Creating short-form media, creating long-form media, as you mentioned, the book and the movie, and countless other small-form media to get this idea out to the public. There were several people in the science realm. We weren't scientists. There were several pioneering farmers in that realm. We weren't the farmers. But we knew we had a role to play to get the idea out. So we really took on that role and have also been included in and participating in a lot of the background stuff with connecting everything from human health with healthcare providers around these concepts all the way to businesses who are investing in their products and their supply and demand side of everything. So it's been really exciting, and we're watching this movement unfold and this idea of healthy soil and regeneration really taking effect and exponentially growing in terms of how many minds are thinking about it. So again, our big dedication to Kiss the Ground, that's Rylan, the other co-founder there with me, is to share this new view, we call it. And in light of that, so before we get into all the nitty-gritty here, I want to just establish this theory of change that Kiss the Ground operates under. Here we have new view equals new action equals the outcomes. So we all know that inherently humanity lives under this guise. We basically, things that we view dictate our actions and our outcomes. For example, most of us have the view that brushing our teeth before we go to bed is a good idea. The action is brushing your teeth. The outcome is you don't have as many cavities. So our views dictate our actions and our outcomes on a minutia level, on small detail, and also on the global level. With governments or businesses. So we're really in the business of creating and solidifying and galvanizing this new view. And what this new view is, sorry to jump forward like that, is really about articulating humanity seeing the difference of where we've been and how we've been operating to what we could be operating, the mindset we could be operating in, from everything from restoring our land to restoring our own human health. So, that being said, we're going to play a little game where we jump to these slides here, and when I'm doing presentations to an audience, which this is an online audience to some degree, we have everyone look at this slide here and then just say in your mind, what does degenerative mean? What, if you were to describe degenerative, or if you were to make up the definition of the word degenerative, what would you say? And most people would say, oh yeah, something that, over time is getting degraded, or it's getting worse, the worst kind of state. Be like, okay, that's great. Now we've established this concept of degenerative in our mind. And what I would say here, and what I often try to get across to people, is humanity has been living inside of a degenerative relationship with nature. Arguably, again, in general, and I say in general because some societies have not been doing this, but at large, across the world, humanity has been operating in a degenerative relationship with nature. To give you a great example of this, humans and farming and farmers right now, there's a term called fallow, which means you let your field or your farm rest and recover after you've used it to produce your food and fiber, right? And the essence of that word and the essence that we are working inside of that relationship means that humans are in an agreement that we destroy the land or degenerate the land, and then we let nature on its own recover. So that relationship is generally a great example of being in a degenerative mindset. Humans' relationship to nature is currently, in general, degenerative. We assume our actions degrade the system. So ecosystem carrying capacity over time in production is reduced. Okay? So then sustainable, again, same exercise. What does sustainable mean? What's the definition of sustainable? Some people say, oh, something being able to be used over and over again, or something not being able to get messed up and, put back what you take out. So the definition of sustainable in the dictionary, one of the main definitions, is able to be used without being completely used up or destroyed. So that is currently what humanity on the environmental side is pushing towards. And I'm going to talk about in a second that we're not against sustainability whatsoever. We just don't think its time has come yet, which I'll explain in a second. But just to get back to referencing human nature and how we're interacting with the planet, I mentioned that we're in a degenerative relationship. So sustainability and conservation are a very logical reaction to a degenerative relationship. You see everything running out. You see us degrading our systems. You see our depletion of the desertification. And we say, whoa, 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 we're going to run out. We must do less harm. So this concept of doing less harm, it makes total sense. But I just want to establish for us what sustainable really is. It's basically saying we have to stop hurting this so bad, able to be used without being completely used up or destroyed. We may get to the brink, but at least we haven't totally messed up this system. Okay, so we're just in our minds, we're able to understand what it means to sustain something. Okay, so now we flip to this slide. We say regenerative. Okay, so regenerative is how everything in nature works, including death. Everything regenerates. So the law of life is that when something is in a system, its cycle of life is not just getting reused. It's actually, in almost every case, helping and assisting in the production of more life. Ecosystem carrying capacity over time in production is going up in the regenerative model. You're not just saying this is our current situation, we must stay here. You're saying we can actually, the natural system will be to make this better. And I gave the example of fallow earlier, where we're letting nature rebound and regenerate. That's because that's what nature does. It heals itself and regenerates itself. So that concept that begs the question, well, why don't we do all of our farming and production of fiber and everything, why don't we do it regeneratively? Why are we stuck in this mentality that we just can't? And the answer is we can. We can live regeneratively. Humans, in our own health and in our ecosystems and in our farm production, everything can be regenerative. Now here it is in symbols. This really helps a lot of people, because when you're out there now sharing this concept, which I encourage greatly to share these ideas, when you're sharing these ideas with people, most of us in the sustainable mindset will nod our heads when you talk about regenerative and say, I know what you're talking about. But as we see the first degenerative curve going down, that's pretty obvious. But this concept of sustainable is really related to the recycling symbol, a lot of these symbols of the circle, putting back what we take out. It's a great idea. It's nothing bad about that idea. But the big question is, if we've degraded our system so badly and the Earth is in such peril, which we'll explain in a few minutes, does sustainable really make sense? So the reason I put these symbols here is when you're explaining regenerative and you don't want people to say, yes, I know what you're talking about, and just put a circle around you. Yeah, I get it. I already knew about this. I've been an environmentalist for a long time. You say, well, regenerative, think about like a diminished starting of a spiral that's ever increasing and ever growing and branching out and growing and branching out and growing. This concept helps you as an advocate explain the difference of sustainable and regenerative to someone so that they can picture it in their mind. Any questions, Kathy?
This is so interesting, Finian. I love this whole concept of regeneration, and it parallels completely our world in nutrition. So it's just beautiful, and it indicates just how well the earth and the human body live in parallel.
Exactly, and we're going to get more to that. So this quote from Albert Einstein, great buddy of mine, says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So again, just to jump back here and just go over this really fast, degenerative is how humans are still entrenched in the concept. We live as if this is how it goes. Sustainable is the reaction to that. Think of those things as an A conversation. A conversation is degenerative and the reaction of it called sustainability or sustaining. The B conversation, the different conversation, is regenerative. It is not just 1, 2, 3. It's not included. It's there over there, degeneration and the reaction called sustainable, and regenerative is in a separate column. It's the B conversation, okay? And what we're saying here is we're giving people a new way of thinking. So that's why this quote's so important, is we're saying we can't fix the problems we currently have with the current way we think. We can't get out of this conundrum thinking degeneratively and thinking that it's inevitable that sustainability is our best option. So we're dealing with a global epidemic. Our agricultural practices are turning the land into desert. For all the viewers out there, to put this into big reality, we've lost 30% of our arable land, our agricultural arable land, in the last 40 years to desertifying and loss of topsoil. The pictures we see have gotten worse. Since this picture was taken from outer space, it's gotten worse since then, and I think this was taken in the 80s or something like that. The last ones that just happened a couple of years back are even worse. We're creating desert at a pace that is insane and scary. We'll talk about that more soon. So, this is an old slide. Pardon the bad-looking graphic here. This is an area where I think is really important. People to understand the premise of time is often overshadowed or undervalued by people's lack of ability to fully comprehend it. Most humans, when you say 3 million years, 200,000 years, 1 billion years, they kind of lump it all together as just a long-ass time ago. And the problem with that is it doesn't give us an appreciation for the intricacies which we're about to talk, whether it's human health, soil health, all of these properties that are established and have evolved. If we contemplate and say 500 million years ago, there were not plants on land. The only plants were in the ocean. And then, because the fungi and the bacteria that were established on land were able to assist the plants out of the ocean, that's why we got plants out of the oceans onto land, is because they had an established relationship with these fungi and bacteria who had been there for ages and ages before that. Okay, so recognize time, really important. So we get this thing called the balanced climate. Remember, back here, this is like Mars. There was more carbon. The surface of the land was extremely hot. There was so much carbon in the atmosphere you can't even understand. It was talk about global warming. Oh my goodness. So then we get this balanced climate. So why do we get this balanced climate? Why do we get fertile soil on the land? Why do we get clean water systems on land? Well, it's this magical thing that we're going to talk about in a second. But first, we look at this tree. So one of my big passions right now is getting more advocates for this idea. And this is a trick, Kathy, for you all to use this. This is a really great way to have people start to think differently. So you either point a tree out and you say, where did that tree come from? Where did the substance, the mass, the structure of the tree, where did it come from? And 99% of people will probably say, well, the ground. And it's a very logical point. Yeah, it has roots. It must have come from the ground. But then you say, well, wouldn't there be, bajillions of holes all over the ground if it came from the ground? And then you say, well, remember photosynthesis? Remember science class? It turns out that the mass of that whole tree, almost the entire tree's mass of substance, came from carbon from thin air, okay? So when people grasp that they're seeing a massive tree and that the thing that they're seeing came out of what we consider nothingness. Humans refer to this air area that we have around us. We consider it nothing. We call it nothing. We don't give it, we call it air, but we don't think about it as stuff. So then we say, wait, the tree and the plant, these things are built out of thin air. Again, this is a major view bender. It changes how someone is thinking about where they live, if there's, desertified area, or if it's an area that it's all hot, and be like, well, what if there were trees? Well, how do we get trees here? Be like, well, plant them. Where do they, how is that going to work? Well, they build themselves out of thin air. That's a really great new way to look at how this whole system operates. So here's a little fun times. Under the leaves primarily, in 1 centimeter squared, there are 300, on average, 300 little teeny mouths that are sucking CO2 out of the air. They're called stomata, and to make it even more real, we put eyes on it. How about that, Kathy? Is that good?
I love it, Finian.
Okay, so basically, plants take carbon from carbon dioxide, connect it with hydrogen from water, where they get from their roots. That's the water substance, and they create carbohydrates, which are the sugars that build the plant. So without those carbohydrates, the plant can't be built. So that's the process. We all learn that. Yeah. But then we say, well, healthy soil is also built from thin air. So most of the textbooks, unfortunately, still are, I don't have a pointer here just to show you, but think of most textbooks are still saying, sand, silt, and clay erodes off of a mountain, and then leaves fall to the ground, and some grass decomposes here, and it becomes soil. That's how most of our brains think of how soil is formed. But unfortunately, that usually, in a normal system, is only about 10 to, on a good side, 20% of what ends up being the stored carbon in the stored real good soil. That stuff, because it decomposes. And when something decomposes, it's being consumed and turned back into CO2. So when we say, well, where did the healthy soil come from? That's the thing that, over the last 20, 30 years in science has been a really big wake-up call of, we didn't really understand how soil was built. So we are really key in on this idea, the exchange, we call it. So why, I didn't say first what happens. So plants and trees and grasses pump upwards between 30 and sometimes even 80% of the carbohydrates, the sugars, or to put it in your perspective, the sap that's in a tree, the liquid that's in a tree, that's what we're talking about, this sugary liquid. They pump up to 80% sometimes of this out of their roots to feed organisms in the soil, primarily the fungi and the bacteria, okay? This is a huge thing. So they say, why would they do that? Well, there's a symbiotic process, and I mentioned that the fungi and bacteria were there before the plants even came onto land, and technically before plants even evolved root systems. these things were acting as their the thing that was actually mining the ground for minerals. So these fungi and bacteria have enzymes that they can excrete that allow for minerals to be soluble for the plant roots. So bacteria, for example, even are, creating enzymes where they're able to eat a certain mineral, and then something like a nematode can eat them, and then the defecation of that is what feeds the plant. There's this whole intricate process that happens because the plant shared these sugars to these organisms, and they live and they die, and they have all these other organisms join them, and there's more organisms in a teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on planet Earth. This is an extremely ridiculous amount of life. This picture doesn't do it justice. So there's trillions of these things, but this is just a zoom in here to kind of give you in this space on the tip of a root there would be gajillions more of these little bacteria than there are here, right? So this is called the rhizosphere, and the way it's shown in this picture is really great because it's showing us like this really big area teeming with life where the roots are exuding sugars into the soil, and all of this life is getting to live off the sugars, and in return are giving the plant metabolites that are making the plant be able to be healthy. Now, this is a really important slide when we're talking about human health. I don't have a pointer here. Can you see my mouse?
Yes,
Kathy?
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, great. You can see my mouse. Perfect. So in this picture, this is a plant without a mycorrhizal fungi partnership. And the fungi actually go into the cell roots, the cell walls of the plant, and they act and they increase the root size of the plant hundreds of thousands of times. And if we look over here, for example, if there was boron or calcium or magnesium in any of these places, that plant could not get it. So when we establish, which 95% of plants on land have this relationship with fungi, when we establish this, look at how much we've increased the roots. So when you're eating a plant and you eat that tomato from the garden and it's like, wow, this tomato tastes amazing. And then you go to a store and you get a conventional tomato and you're like, this tomato tastes like cardboard. Just on a quick reference, the tomato that tastes like cardboard, first of all, the soil probably didn't look nearly this dark. So let's just establish that. It probably looked very tan and dead. But generally, when we think about the nutrition and the secondary metabolites that are existing, and our taste buds can taste it because we want it. We want those secondary metabolites in our food. We need them to be healthy. When we look at the comparison of these two systems, which one do you want your food to come from? Which one do you think is going to make a healthier produce? Yeah, this one on the left might have something that looks big and plump, but the farmer has had to add tons of synthetics to make that work. So they're adding more and more chemicals to make that work every year. But on this right side, nature is doing everything for us. It's a developed system, 500 million years of research and development to make it so that this system produces healthy, vibrant, even protect themselves from pests, because when this relationship is happening with the fungi are able to provide the plant with the correct defenses, everything from making its leaves taste bad to making it create an armor on itself. All sorts of amazing things can happen when you have all of the nutrients in the soil available to you, because the microorganisms are mining it. They mine the nutrients that the plant needs. The plant can't do that on its own. Okay?
Finian,
cool.
I
So
don't want to get ahead of you, but if I may ask a question, the plant on the left, is that a result, the weakness of the roots, is that a result of what the farmer has imposed upon the land and made the land, the soil weak?
Great question. So in several scenarios, like I mentioned, 95% of all plants use this symbiotic relationship with fungi. But the way we farm and we kill the soil we're going to talk about that in a second. We till the soil, we destroy these mycorrhizal fungi networks that are established, and they do come back often if we treat the soil better, and we can actually inoculate the soil with them. But this is simply showing this is how nature evolved from the get-go on this right side. And here, this example here is our naked, the soil is just a growing medium. We just be like, oh, it might as well be cardboard. Just put the plants in there. That's like our place where we just prop up plants. We're treating the soil as an inert substance, but it's alive. If we treat it as a living system and utilize and maximize its potential, we can have outstanding results. And I want people to just think about when they've tasted that really epically flavorful strawberry or tomato, that's a result of the system working to be able to get all those secondary metabolites into that piece of food. Cool?
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. So this slide is really showing, and we didn't get into it in depth, but we're talking about aggregation. So the mycorrhizal fungi, why they're so cool, to jump back here, is they actually have a sticky substance on all of these things called hyphae. This substance called glomalin is actually a sticky protein, which is made out of carbon, that when it breaks off the plant root, it aggregates the soil particles together. And when you aggregate things together, you create air and water spaces and little clusters where trillions of organisms can live and move and have a healthy system. So this is nature's way. When we're pumping carbon through the plant, feeding the fungi and the bacteria are aggregating the soil particles together. This is how healthy soil is built, and it makes it work for the whole system, for the abundance of nature and all the organisms to live. So over here on the right side, you're seeing a dead soil that creates compaction and allows for water when it rains to run off, and it doesn't allow for as much air to infiltrate in. And we all know that life, generally, most life wants oxygen and nitrogen from the air as well as water to be able to live. So this system is really saying nature invented a way to make this work for everything and work better, and this system is totally destructive, and that's what we're living in much of humanity right now. Okay, so I often call this slide the most important slide on global climate change, and really what we're seeing here is current numbers of carbon. So atmosphere, 750 billion tons of carbon. Biosphere, 550 billion tons of carbon. Biosphere is all plants, animals, anything living really. And then the pedosphere, look at this number, 2,300 billion tons of carbon. And that's in a reduced state. That's with all of the degradation of soil that we have, the soil loss that we've created around the world. So when we say, wait a minute, all of that carbon used to be up in the atmosphere before it was in the biosphere, which is the land, animals, and plants. It all used to be up there. And when we grasp that soil still in its degraded state holds way more carbon, all of a sudden we say, wait a minute. We learned that planting trees is good to reverse climate change because they're made out of carbon. Cool. But what about the soil? This is everywhere on land. We could build this substance up and build this mat of carbon up very quickly, and it makes everyone's lives better. Okay? So this is really, when we look at balancing, that we could pull carbon from the atmosphere back and build up this soil to what it once was and have a significant result on our climate. Most farming destroys the soil building system, however. That's the big problem. So we just talked about a system. Plants pull carbon from the atmosphere, pump it into the ground, feed the organisms. They create healthy soil. Everyone's lives get better. Regeneration happens. More ecosystem carrying capacity is created, blah, 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 blah. But we unfortunately farm that completely destroys that system. So it's always trying to regenerate itself, and we're always degenerating it. In the U.S. alone, we lose 1.7 billion tons of carbon-rich topsoil annually. That equates to approximately 4 tons of topsoil per acre per year. Do you see how insane that is? 4 tons? Think about how heavy 4 tons is. Okay? Then think about that much soil every year being lost off every single acre of cropland in the U.S. And we wonder why our food nutrition has been significantly declining, rapidly declining since the 1930s. That's the reason. So, converting to regenerative agriculture can change that because we can build back soil. This is in North Dakota, one of the driest states in the United States, only 16 inches of rainfall. This gentleman, Gabe Brown, is a great friend of ours, grew soil from 2% soil organic matter to 8% soil organic matter. And just to put it in perspective, when you increase your soil organic matter by 5%, a 1% increase of soil organic matter is equal to being able to hold around 20,000 gallons more of water in your soil per acre. So let's say, 5% increase, you're dealing with, this is actually a 6% increase, you can add it. But anyways, I usually say in my talks, 5% increase, you're going to be talking about 100,000 gallons more of water per acre on your farm. Isn't that crazy? Think about the health of that system. Look at this system. What this looked like as 2% soil organic matter almost looks like dust. Look at the worms in here. The plants are able to get and pull up all these nutrients, which are going to make them healthier in the long run. We can build soil. This is a farmer we just got a picture from, just wrote in the story. They were dealing with, several years ago, about 10, 15 years ago, their soil was just down here. And they built all of this ridiculous amounts of soil very quickly. So we used to be told in our textbooks it takes 500 years to build a centimeter of soil. Not true. We can build soil so much faster. Okay, so now we're going to go very quickly over these next slides to really compare when we're sourcing our food and where the big frontier is right now is consumers and businesses alike realizing, and governments realizing that the old model of degenerative agriculture is constantly putting us all in a state of fear and anxiety and increased food costs and blah, 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 blah. We're basically saying, look, when we're tilling the ground and supporting agriculture that tills the ground, everyone's losing. We are tilling, we're destroying the mycorrhizal fungi networks, we are burning this soil up and allowing it to oxidize and turn into CO2. As you see here, are very easy to read. CO2 going up, water going up, and regenerative no-till, which is happening more and more all over the U.S. Farmers, conventional and organic, are all taking up no-till, which is really exciting. So this is the difference. You can start to support these things, asking your farmers if they do no-till. And you can start demanding that your big purchasers are starting to support regenerative agriculture. Bare soil. I just give people the reminder that most of us have driven down the highway, flown over the U.S. in a plane, and seen miles and miles and miles of bare soil. And our kind of internal dialogue is that's just what farming is. But the reminder is, why do we think that's just what farming is? Yeah, that's what it's been. That's what we've been doing. But that's a problem, and we haven't been looking at it. So farmers can keep the ground covered. When we keep the ground covered, we reduce erosion. We reduce the heat that is the heat index of the soil. So this soil on the right, probably on a hot 105-degree day, would be about 80 degrees. This soil would be even hotter, about 115 degrees. 125, 130, which is going to kill all the microbes in the top foot of that soil. It's ridiculous. Terrible idea. It creates desertification and allows for massive erosion to happen. Okay, and so I'm going over these rather quickly here. So chemicals. Obviously, when we're applying chemicals, especially fungicides and herbicides, to kill things, we're not just killing the things we're targeting. We're killing usually over 120 beneficial organisms. That's just a low average count. When we're targeting one pest, we're killing at least that many beneficial organisms that are in the soil, helping make the system work better. No chemicals can happen. We can do it. There's plenty of regenerative farmers who've completely reduced all their chemical inputs. Under overgrazing, we see and we blame cattle and we blame all animals for degrading the whole Middle East, Northern Africa. All these places have become desertified because of overgrazing and bad farming practices. But it's not the animal's fault. It's how we manage them. Naturally, animals in the wild are herded up and they bunch together and they have a system that actually helps regenerate the land. You can look this up online. I really encourage you to. But it's a very different thing from overgrazing or undergrazing to planned grazing and making it so that you're actually helping regenerate the land. It can happen faster than pretty much any other regenerative farming practice at this point. Okay, annual versus perennial. Annuals are typically just for edification. This is stuff that's being usually tilled and cut every year. Perennials are every year they come up again or stay on top of the land. That's pretty obvious. Organics in landfills versus composting. Everyone out there, please compost. It just has to be done now, and it can help. If you do it in your backyard, you can start to grow your own plants from your own compost, and I swear those plants will taste epic, and they will taste nutrient dense, and they will make you healthier. And putting your hands in the soil and the compost is good for you anyway. They've proven it. But the point is, putting compost on rangelands, putting on our lands can actually help sequester carbon year on year for up to 30 to 40 years. It's an amazing research project that comes out of Marin. Check it out. Windbreaks, blah, blah, blah. Concentrated animal feeding operations. This is one of the most horrific designs that humans have created, and it's actually one of the biggest contributors in agriculture to climate, to greenhouse gases. And so when people say cows are the problem, whether it's CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, or overgrazing, both of those systems are human error systems. There have been and would remain, if it weren't for humans, way more cow-like animals, what are they called, ruminants, than there are on the planet now. Back when we had herds of buffalo and all these other animals, they work with nature and they regenerate it. We can mimic that by utilizing the way we move cattle. And trust me, when you see the before and after results with these people who are doing it, like Dr. Alan Williams, oh my gosh, it's an exciting opportunity to change all of our right now we're importing tons and tons and tons of grain from the middle of the country to feed cows on the California coast, which is just ridiculous, where we could have planned grazing happening in the middle of the country and having that land regenerate and localized beef sourcing, et cetera, et cetera. Just makes complete sense. Silvopasture, one of the fastest. Yeah.
Forgive me for interrupting you again. This is just so fascinating. And I'm so happy that you're showing these beautiful pictures of the cows grazing on beautiful green, healthy grass and the terrible CAFO operations. I don't know if many of our viewers know that cows are actually vegetarian, and the importation of grain and corn is what they're principally fed on most farms in the U.S., as you know, and corn, of course, is a grain, and so that ties itself very much to the issues with the climate that you're talking about because of the expression of methane gas. Yeah. So
it's a really hot topic right now, and when you do the research, and I encourage everyone to do it, I don't want to make your decision for you here, but yes, if you have the only option that you have is CAFO beef, do everything you can to eliminate the consumption of that. It is bad. It is one of the worst things that we do right now. But the big misconception, and this is where changing our view from sustainability to regenerative, when we look holistically and we stop just being this versus this, when we look holistically at this situation, we can use and we have to have animal incorporation into any farm. So when we look at this and in terms of seeing the future and a viable future that works, we can't just say all cows have to go away. They mess it up. They're like, no, we messed up by how we manage cows. If you don't want to eat meat, you don't have to. But the point is that there were more of these type of animals on the planet before than there are now, and we can actually help this system work in our current paradigm. So it's a really big discussion. It's a really hot topic, but I really encourage people to get into it and don't choose sides really quickly. We have plenty of vegans who work for Kiss the Ground. The founder of Kiss the Ground, the other founder is a vegan, owns a vegan restaurant, but he had to come to terms with the fact that cows are a real part of any system. So it's not easy for everyone here, but it's just when you dig in, there's truth there. Don't jump on one side, bandwagon too soon. Intercropping, really important. Okay, so really what we're trying to get at is healthy soil or dust. There is a choice. I really want to drive home. In my longer presentations, I'm giving clear examples. Like the Middle East that we know of now is extremely desertified. Northern Africa is extremely desertified. There's places all over the world that are extremely desertified. But if you read past historical records and if you read what geologists are saying right now, it's showing what was happening at those times and what happened in the U.S. before the Dust Bowl and what's happening in the U.S. right now. Humans are the ones that are creating these deserts primarily, almost every desert. There's a few exceptions of naturally occurring deserts that have been deserts for eons. But most deserts have been created by humans. And I will argue, if anyone wants to debate it, I will debate it, and I will reference all the people who are geologists who study this, who are also soil scientists. It's very clear now that humans are creating dust, or humans now not just doing less dust creation, which is sustainability, we can actually create healthy soil in our farming systems rather quickly. And that is so exciting. We have an opportunity, because soil is full of carbon, to not just make our water systems work, to not just make our nutrition. Like, look at this soil on the right. Wouldn't you rather your food came from that? We just inherently know, our bodies know, when you pick up that healthy soil, that's the good stuff. And when you're eating food coming from the dust that's going to need a major amount of chemical inputs, you know that that's not good. And when we get to know our farmers, we get to know where our food is coming from, and then you taste the difference. That's the coolest thing. You know, chefs are getting really excited about this because they're like, wait a minute, I'm already sourcing from the food that tastes the best. Oh, and it turns out that the farmer whose food tastes the best has the best soil practices that are helping reverse climate change and increasing water holding capacity and restoring our whole ecosystem. They're excited about this because it's a reality. They get to choose the best quality, best tasting food that actually is the most nutritious for their customers and for everyone, and it's doing all these benefits. And it saves the farmer money in the long run because they're not having to put all these inputs in every year on year, more pesticides. Just a little factoid, 15% to 14% is the average increase every year for herbicides and pesticides for farmers. Think about that. If we don't regenerate every year, that's going to keep happening. Farmers are going to make less and less money per ton of food that they're creating. So anyway, it's completely possible. We can do it. We must do it. So what does it mean when we have healthy soil? When we're building healthy soil, it means less CO2 in the atmosphere because we sucked it out with the plants and put it in with the organisms in the soil. We have healthier food. This is, again, I really want everyone to get this. When we have the taste of the food, and more and more, and there's a really exciting thing to announce is coming soon, where they're using spectrometer technology to analyze what is available in a piece of produce or food when you scan it, is basically being able to see what is in that food, what's available, what's readily available for humans to digest and use. And the exciting thing is it's going to make it so you can look at food before you purchase it and actually pick the food that's going to be the most nutritious for you instead of whatever the label is telling you. So you'll be able to say, oh yeah, not only do I know if there's glyphosate and this other stuff in this food or the level of it, I actually can know what nutrition value is in this food, and then therefore I'll buy this potato or this piece of celery over this other brand, which is really exciting. And the good news is you don't have to become a soil geek to know about it. You just choose the best food, and it turns out that the best food comes from the best soil. So if you don't have good soil practices, you'll never have high numbers on this thing that determines the metabolites and all these other things in the food. So does that make sense? Really exciting.
Completely. Very exciting.
It's coming from the Bionutrient Food Association. Super, super exciting. Drought resistance. This is huge. We have famine and all these things happening all over the world right now. Increasing the sponginess of the soil's ability to absorb, retain, and infiltrate water is increasingly important. If we don't restore underground water supplies, and if we don't have our soil able to hold water over the course of several months during dry seasons, we will constantly be facing worse and worse droughts. And look at this picture. I want you to think for a second. The heat island effect coming off of this land, and this is looks like a dry bed somewhere, but any desert, anything with no plant vegetation. Plants are endothermic, meaning when the sun shines on them, even though they're dark green, they don't get hot. But if you put a piece of dark green rubber or dark green paper out, it's going to get hot. The cool thing about leaves is, or grasses, is they don't get hot. They actually suck in heat and use it, and then they put it up, and moisture comes out, and it's all awesome. So the point is, you put your hand here, or you put your hand on cement, or you put your hand on grass, the difference is just obvious. So if we don't have plant species that are protecting our soil, keeping it covered, we're going to constantly creating more heat, and that radiant heat is actually pushing clouds away, dispersing the ability for cloud formation to occur, which inhibits the ability for small water cycles to work. This is really, really important when we look globally at all of these man-made deserts and these areas where it's just open and nothing is planted. We're sabotaging the future because we're creating more of a positive feedback loop for desertification to continue. We can reverse it. All right, this is just a quick example, infiltration, water slowing, how we can go into terribly wrecked areas and increase water flow so that it absorbs into the soil. We can restore habitats. Remember what I said, more organisms in a healthy teaspoon of soil than there are people on the planet right now. When we have the abundance of life in the bottom, all of the life can exist above it because, you know, we have trophic levels. Things eat things, things eat things. If we have healthy life in the soil, the system has tons and tons of the bottom chain of food is able to keep alive everything above it. All the birds return, tons of animals come back, blah, blah, blah. Clean water, this is a really fun one. Carbon in the ground. Remember when I showed you the slide where we had dead soil and the water was running off? You know, people think muddy rivers after a rain is a natural phenomenon. There we go, it's just muddy rivers. That's not supposed to happen. What's really cool about nature's design with soil is that when water infiltrates in, the carbon in the soil acts just as the carbon does in your Brita filter or any carbon filter for water. The long chains of carbon are able to grab any of the impurities out of the water, so when water percolates through the soil profile, it actually filters itself naturally. So when it hits a clay bottom or hits somewhere, or it restores an underground aquifer or somewhere where a well can tap in, and or it hits a clay bed and goes out and becomes a spring 90 meters away and feeds the river that way, that's going to be clear water. And that's going to raise the water table up from these depleted water areas. So when we see a rain happen, water primarily in most flourishing ecosystems, the water still comes out rather clear because it's going through underground. It's not just running across the land and creating erosion and pulling with it all of the sediments and all of the minerals in the soil from the top. It's going through and then going out into those rivers. Does that make sense? So we can create clean water, we can create abundant water by fixing our soil. Yeah, that's what I talked about before, restoring small water cycles. This is what barren land looks like. Bad, bad, bad. Okay, so generally the message is the goal is to convert the mind. We need more people to think differently. Farmers won't change if you just tell them what to do differently. They have to think differently. Consumers, politicians, government officials, we desperately need people who are in healthcare. These huge healthcare industries could be saving so much money. Insurance companies could be saving so much money if there were less sick people. I know some people make money off of sick people, but you know, whatever. They have their own issues to deal with when they live. But we as a whole society could be doing so many things differently with less investment, less money spent. We could have healthier, vibrant, richer, more human health if people were grasping that we have this option to not just hold on for dear life and sustain what's currently happening. We can regenerate the world. It's so epic. I encourage people to look up where, you know, places in India, like the one video is called Water Gandhi. Look up John D. Liu, who's documented the whole restoration projects like the Laos Plateau in China, where they took an area the size of Denmark and completely restored it by doing restoration projects and restoring the life in the soil and the ground and the whole feedback loop. Like, this is possible on a worldwide level. We can do it. There are many examples. It's just how limited it is currently in the human condition. That's why we need more spokespeople for it. We can't just count on the farmers and the scientists. We need more people promoting this so this becomes the concept. The desperate thing we're trying to do at Kiss the Ground is have people think and act and live regeneratively, because once we do that, abundance is possible. That's the only way out of scarcity and lack and fight for all of the resources, is if we create more source. All we've been doing is using source and not paying attention to it, but now we can create source. We can create fresh water. We can create natural springs. We literally can bring fresh water back to areas and not just import water or be humanitarian aid. Like, it's just epic what we can do to restore things, because nature wants to. It's just been trying. We've just been beating it up too hard. So what if you kiss the ground? And this is exciting. We have our new book coming out, and it just launched. We had an awesome event back in 2017, at the end of 2017 in December. We had an event where we had, it was in November actually, there you go, a book reading with all these fine celebrities who are friends of ours. It was really fun. And then Kiss the Ground, the movie, is coming out. Like we mentioned, Leonardo DiCaprio is executive producing, and it's really exciting. It's been in the works for about 3 years, telling the whole story of the regenerative agriculture movement. Kiss the Ground is also teaching a speaker training series, which I love teaching. We have about 80 online students and about 20 in class. And our next one, all from about 15 countries around the world, people can tune in. You can do it online or you can do it in person. The next class is going to be starting on April 10th, on Tuesday, April 10th. It's a 6-week course. If you're interested in becoming an advocate for soil and people thinking regeneratively and acting regeneratively, I encourage you to take the class. But this has been a pleasure. I'm really excited about organizations like yours that are really trying to integrate this holistic thinking in our health, the planet's health, because the fun and exciting news is we don't have to live in the just barely squeaking by with sustaining what we've already degenerated. We can regenerate our own health, our own gut health. And any questions? I didn't really get into gut health, Kathy, so if you want me to talk more about how that is an amazing parallel to root, I can do that if you want. But let's do some questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Finian. And yes, a lot of those gut issues were popping in my mind as you were going through the presentation. So this has been a great presentation, and thank you for taking a couple of questions. We do have time for a few. Finian, tell us a little bit. You did a great job explaining everything, but tell us a little bit about the soil's link to nutrition.
Great question. So I didn't get into this fully. So one of the things that's really exciting to do, and I don't have the slide for it right now, Kathy, but if anyone's interested, I can definitely email it to them. But one of the really cool things to look at is the parallel. I remember I showed you the rhizosphere, where the roots are exuding their sugars to feed the bacteria and the fungi, right?
Yes.
So they're like sweating out, right? So the root is sweating out sugars to feed these bacteria, right? So then we think about our gut, and I want you to take that image and reverse it. So all of a sudden the bacteria are on the inside, okay? So when we eat things like kale and other vegetables like that, we are not actually the ones who are making that digestion happen, okay? So why this is so similar to the root is exuding sugars to feed the correct bacteria so that they mine and can metabolize the correct minerals in the soil, right, and make them soluble. So then we reverse that and we say on the outside of this tube called in our gut, there are these little things that fire and push in certain sugars to increase the populations of certain bacteria in our gut that are able to metabolize and basically get the best out of something that we're eating, okay? So if we don't have that biology in there, if we've somehow basically washed it out from all of our chlorine or whatever we're eating, the terrible things we're eating, all the antibiotics that we're taking, or the glyphosate that we're eating that doesn't kill human cells, but it does kill some bacterial cells. Anyway, if we've destroyed that gut biology, it doesn't matter how much sugars and things are being fed from the outside of our gut in there to feed the correct biology if they're not there. Does that make sense? So when we eat probiotics and help reestablish our gut flora, what that gut flora is doing is it's the thing that's eating and or not decomposing is a bad word, but because they're so small, they're bacteria, it's not like an animal. But they're processing that kale, if you will, and allowing for that process. We get the secondary process of that. We're not eating the kale directly. It's the working on of all of this biology in our gut. So if you think about it in that inverse way, it's a really cool, and it's so right on in terms of biologically what's happening. If you think about it like that, like the outside of our gut, there's all these mechanisms that are pushing in and managing all of that gut biota so that it properly digests what's coming through, so that we can take advantage and utilize and become soluble of those minerals and nutrition that are in there. Does that make sense?
Yes, very good, Finian. You could be a nutritionist in your next life. For one last question, Finian, and you've told us about what's next for Kiss the Ground, I believe, with the new book and the upcoming film, which I'm very excited. We're all very excited to see. That's going to spread this word. But one last question that we kind of thought was interesting came our way is people are saying that the next wars will be fought over water. And so how can building healthy soil help this?
That's a great question, Kathy. I think what we're dealing with still, and I think this is one of the best examples of humanity still stuck in our thinking our old thinking mentality, our old view. So when we're stuck in thinking, for example, I think California is a great example of this. So many people, because of the human condition of not really being able to integrate history very well, we see California's current flora and fauna and current state of being as what it is. So I have many friends who consider California to be slightly desert area, and that's just what they've seen, and they drive up the 5 and it looks desertified, and yeah, sure, if it rains it might get a big plumage, foliage of that. But what we're failing to recognize is that the system used to work completely differently, and there used to be a lot more water and a lot more recycling of water in this whole region. So when we started with the Spaniards started overgrazing years and years ago, that's when we started to get the degradation of our slopes and started to get erosion and started to get lack of infiltration of water on our soils here. And this region changed. Something called regime change happens when certain plants take over as the prominent plants because other things like perennial grasses can no longer sustain themselves properly. You get desert-style plants coming back. So when we talk about water and we talk about infiltration rates and or lack thereof, when we say here's a system, look at California, look at places in the Middle East, we say if people's minds are stuck on this is just how this system is, and in the Bible, for example, it's like the land of milk and honey, being like, well, yeah, it used to be that, and then it turned into a desert in 300 years because everyone overgrazed and tilled and wrecked the soil, and it all eroded, and then it turned into a desert, and now it can only hold like 500 to 1,000 people, and it used to hold 25,000 people. These are things that happen because we diminish the ecosystem carrying capacity of an area, and the good news is we can regenerate them. So when we talk about water, and we have all this land that when it rains, we're dealing with billions and billions of tons of water running off of that land instead of slowing down, sinking, and spreading into the soil surface. That is unused or unutilized water. That type of idea, when we're saying, oh, wow, is this effective rainfall? Is this rainfall actually having a positive effect on the system at all? Or is it actually creating a flood? So we have the same amount of rainfall in some of these areas. Sometimes it's coming more intensely all at once. But we're not recognizing that we can change what happens with that water. And that water, there's great examples in Ethiopia where, part of their country after the big famine in the 90s started doing all these rehabilitation projects. And they literally have rivers flowing where there used to be just desert. And why? Because in the hillsides, they created tree canopy and they planted trees. So now when it rains, instead of a rain happening and all 90% of that water flowing off the land into the river and then being gone or evaporating from the top layer of soil, it infiltrates in and it gets held in the soil, and you have freshwater streams that are running constantly. So the fact that we can regenerate and restore water systems, and it's, again, the first thing is people recognizing that it's not just the way it is. The land in California, the land in the Middle East wasn't like that before. We created that. If we get everyone to understand it, every government, every policymaker to get that it's not just the way it is, and then understand simultaneously that we can regenerate and restore these water cycles and bring back this water, this idea of inevitable wars over water can be averted. That's what I'm really hoping for, is more people to grasp that water systems can be restored because they are the essence of life on land.
So well said, and this incredibly instructive, Finian. Thanks so much. Unfortunately, our time is up. I just have to say that, yes, we can do this. This has just been an awesome presentation and extremely enlightening evening for all of us here at the American Nutrition Association and our many viewers from around the world. So we do invite our audience, before we close, to learn more about your work at kisstheground.com. And with that, I will close out the program and say good night to our audience and best of health to you all.